let's take a second, as I set Richfield back up on his feet there, let's take a second and talk about the lost art of the parody. Parodies and spoof films have degenerated over the last couple years, so much to the point that I don't think there are even any more of them out. I don't remember the last time they actually did one. I know in the early 2000s there was a kind of a renaissance, but they were nowhere near the quality they had been in the 80s and into the early 90s. And you'd think that a parody, making fun of something, a satire of something, would be an easy thing to do, but it's really not. No less a authority than Mel Brooks said that to make an appropriate parody, you first have to love the subject that you're parodying. And that is the golden apple right there, folks. That is the pearl of wisdom that a lot of filmmakers going forward didn't heed. You look at the movies from the 2000s, the parodies, the not another this film, not another that film, whatever. There are a couple of okay ones in there with some good jokes. But what they seem to lack is any kind of genuine affection for the topics that they're making fun of. And that's the thing you need. You need to, you can't just point out, hey, this is stupid and that's stupid, or hey, look at this in these movies, isn't that stupid? You know, just basically call everything dumb. You know, they do that, or they infest it with nothing but toilet and sex humor, which is funny maybe once or twice in a film, but constantly and nonstop, it just gets tiring. It becomes elementary school humor. Poo poo, pee pee, ah. Now, the truly great parodies are the ones that love their subject matter. They understand, first of all, what goes into the making of them. What makes a good disaster film? What makes a good cop movie or show? What makes a successful military adventure? You know, things like that. And what it also understands is that the tropes and the tendencies of those films, the problematic elements, are not things to just be kind of pulled out and made fun of. They are the things that, yeah, it's nice to hang a lampshade on, but you also have to understand that the fans of that genre or that type of movie or whatever movie you're making fun of love the movie not in spite of the problems and the tropes, but because of them. You love Star Trek because of the silliness, not in spite of it. You know, the original show with the bad special effects and whatnot. That's what gave it charm. You acknowledge that they're there, and it's a different thing from irony, of I'm enjoying this ironically. It's, no, I acknowledge that's a problem, but it's what makes the show special. Another great thing about comedy is that comedy lets us see... comedy is the great connection between humanity. We can laugh at the same things, even though we are coming from completely different points of view. And sometimes it's great to look at a film, a comedy movie, from a standpoint that you yourself are not familiar with, and see that even if you don't know the content as well, you can still find the jokes funny. And that's the case here today with 1988's I'm Gonna Get You, Sucka. So, I'm Gonna Get You, Sucka comes to us from the comedy dynasty that is the Wayans family. Now, some of you from like the 2000s and whatnot may only be familiar with Marlon Wayans. As he's kind of the one that's still in movies or still doing comedies now. But the Wayans family comedy dynasty goes back to the early the late 80s, early 90s, headed up by the oldest brother, Keenan Ivory Wayans. Keenan Ivory Wayans, of course, created the show In Living Color, which was incredibly funny, kind of the Fox black answer to Saturday Night Live. He was the director-writer of this film, also future Wayans Brothers vehicles like Don't Be a Menace to South Central, Drinking Your Juice in the Hood, and the first Scary Movie. And Keenan Ivory Wayans is a unique comic voice. Keenan Ivory Wayans seemed to understand something that I don't see in a lot of other filmmakers. He rode the line just so well. His humor and his comedies were from, understandably, the African American perspective, the black perspective. But he knew enough to make sure that it was inclusive, so that even though they would make fun of the white man and Whitey and the man, that the white man, Whitey, and the man could also laugh at the comedy. That's a very difficult line to walk, and he walked it better than anyone else at that time, or maybe ever. So let's backtrack. I got a little off on a rant here, but let's talk about this movie. So what is the story of this movie? So this movie is clearly a parody of what were called exploitation, or the other name, blaxploitation movies of, the 60s and 70s. So here, Keenan Ivory Wayans' character Jack Spade returns home after his brother Junebug has died from an OG. He had too much gold chains. He sets about gathering up a bunch of old heroes from the 60s and 70s to help him bring down the evil crime boss, Mr. Big, and hilarity ensues. I have to say I love this film. I think it's hysterical. It's just as hysterical now as it was the first time I saw it. And I think one of the benefits of it, one of the things I can really say about it, is that it's funny, even though I am very unfamiliar with the subject matter. I've seen the Shaft movies, but that's about it. I'm not an aficionado of exploitation films of the 60s and 70s. I'm just not. But the fact that I am able to recognize the tropes, recognize the story structure, and laugh at the jokes, even though I am clearly not the target audience, says something about the person behind it. And Keenan Ivory Wayans is the driving force behind this film. It's his sense of humor and his overall vision. I know that Damon Wayans, there in the late 90s, and again, because of In Living Color, kind of became the more famous of the Wayans brothers. But none of his movies ever really landed. They never really, they didn't become comedy classics. And I believe that is mostly because Keenan Ivory Wayans wasn't at the helm. At least I don't believe so. Keenan Ivory Wayans had an excellent way of bringing his family into it and utilizing their talents to the best of their ability, and then filling out the cast with other people who could do the other heavy lifting. He has a great cast here. Playing kind of the retired Shaft-esque character, Bernie Casey. Isaac Hayes and Jim Brown play, Slammer and Hammer. It's just a great cast. Some of whom had done exploitation films back in the day. Hell, everybody knows Isaac Hayes did the soundtrack to the pinnacle of exploitation films with Shaft. So having him in there, so again, even from someone who is not an aficionado of those films, it's very clear that Keenan Ivory Wayans has a deep affection for those movies. And not to get too political, it's hard not to, under the shadow of what's going on at the time of this recording. But it's also interesting to get the African American perspective on what was kind of the pinnacles of African American culture. In the 60s and 70s, the way most people knew African American culture was through the exploitation film. And I don't think he's making this movie to make any kind of big statement, but it is clearly a reflection on how the African American community views that, both the positive and the negative of it. He would do the same thing a few years later with Don't Be a Menace to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood, a parody of, the growing up in the hood gangsta films that were very popular at that time. So again, kind of looking at what is the African American reaction to those films kind of being the primary depiction of their culture and their race. And even when it's not something that is directly, seen as an African American experience, like the horror movies, like the very first Scary Movie, which I still think is fairly funny. I think it starts to show the degrading of the format. There's a lot more sex jokes. There's a lot more gross out humor. But still, you can see it has the working thesis of what is the African American perspective of these movies, especially at that time when self-awareness of the horror genre was coming into popularity. And of course, the joke of, the black guy always dies first. So they kind of shone the light on and says, well, what is that reaction? What do they think about the black guy always dies first? What do they think about the stupid white people that inhabit these movies? So it's an interesting perspective on a genre that really nobody else has the qualifications to comment on. So what this really is a very skilled think piece about the interpretation of black culture by predominantly white audiences and how the black culture views that perception. Nah, I'm bullshitting you. It's a comedy. I think those themes are there. I think that was definitely in his mind. But let's not try to make this something it's not. It's a fucking funny movie. And it has a lot of fun with its premise and the characters that it creates to do it. Again, I can't run down all of the jokes in this that I laugh at, but let's just hit some of the highlights. The concept of Keenen Ivory Wayans' character as being a mama's boy whose mom has to come fight his battles, to the extent of literally showing up with a shotgun at the end in her slippers and robe to basically save his ass. Very funny. Damon Wayans and Kadeem Hardison play two of the henchmen of Mr. Big, who are his nephews. They never explain that, but they're always calling him Uncle Mr. Big, who are just two dumbasses who are always being thwarted and then told, well, there's two ways out of here. You can either be thrown out the window or go down the stairs. They say, well, take the stairs, so they're always being tossed down the stairs. And as the film goes on, they're getting more and more injured, like they're showing up with casks and neck braces, and all these things are being thrown down the stairs so much. Probably one of the great moments of this film is when Bernie Casey's come out, and he's all dressed in black leather and shit, and he's ready to go, and he just looks cool as hell, and he's walking, and of course the Shaft music starts, and then they get a long shot, and there's these musicians following behind him making the music, and he comes up, and Keenen Ivory Wayans like, who are these guys? That's my theme music. Every good hero should have one. Great, very funny stuff. I don't know what else to say about this one. Again, with a comedy, it's really hard to critique because it's such a subjective thing. What I find funny is not what you find funny. But I love a good parody. I love a parody that the creators clearly have respect for the genre, but also want to have fun with the genre. I respect a comedy that anyone can enjoy. Some people are clearly going to appreciate it on a deeper level than others, but that doesn't mean that the casual viewer can't enjoy it. I think that takes a great deal of skill. I think Keenan Ivory Wayans is a brilliant comedy director. He knows exactly how to time his jokes. He knows that you need to have a joke and enough time for the audience to react to it, and before you set up the next one, as opposed to just kind of a rapid fire, this, and this. He knows that you need to vary the jokes between verbal comedy, physical comedy, shock humor, and find the balance where all of those things can contribute to the overall product. He always knew how to do that so very well. It shows in this one, it shows in Don't Be a Menace, and it shows, again, a bit of the shine is off, but it shows in Scary Movie. But I think this was his first one, and I think this is probably just one of the funniest parodies that came out of that time period, and it's overshadowed. And I think that's a shame. So if you're like me, you like a good parody, you like a good goofy comedy made by really funny people with a really keen sense of humor and a keen awareness of their audience, go back and check this one out again. I think you'll enjoy it. So again, that's much shorter than usual, but with these comedies, I'm never really sure what else to say. They're funny. It's funny. Go fucking watch it. What do you want? So yeah, so we're ending a little early this time, but that's okay. Thanks for watching, and as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.